the message. Before I do so, I want to give a little thanks. Thanks to my mom. Thanks to my grandmother, ancestors, Cleo and Ruby. I'm here because they helped bring me here. I want to give thanks to the Kazort family. This is the first Black family that came into First UU. And I have to acknowledge that they did something magical and they did something very brave. And they broke the path of ground where I now get to walk and talk to you here. So thanks for that. Now, we've been wrestling and talking about justice these past few weeks, and it's been pointed out some of the different ways that justice can manifest itself and the places where fights for justice can be had. But today I want to talk about more the idea of where it comes from, or who it's coming from. People are we're the ones that get to decide if justice is present, and we're the ones that get to decide, is there enough of it? Is the justice we have sufficient? But let me ask you a different, more personal question. Have you ever been in like a work meeting, committee meeting, some type of gathering where input needed to be involved? There was a plan in place, or you were trying to get somewhere, and you felt like nobody was really listening to what you had to say, that somehow you saw that one particular flaw, that one fly in the ointment, even though everyone else thinks it's settled. How does that go, and how does that work out for you? We're going to come back to that feeling and question here in a second. Bible story I want to talk about for this topic of where does justice come from, comes from the book of Numbers. Not a book I really frequent in my Bible time, I'm going to confess with you, but here it is today. And in the book of Numbers, there is this story called about the daughters of Zelophehad. The daughters of Zelophehad is a story where basically the people of Israel are getting ready to move into the promised land, and there have been property discussions talked about, and they're having to decide, okay, this tribe is getting this, y'all are here, this tribe, y'all are getting that. They're doing this thing, and the chapter right before it, they basically kind of wrapped this up. They wrapped out all of the who's getting what and who we've cut up the pie, and everything seems good. And so you can imagine, like, all right, we're good bit of business, everything's taken care of. But then here come the daughters. And the daughters, they come and they make this claim, and they tell them, like, hey, you think everything is cool and you've made the right choice and split up the land as it should be, but you have left us out. That's a problem. That's a problem. You've left us out. We also deserve our peace. We deserve our rights, our property as well. And I'm paraphrasing this because the exact specifics of the verses aren't as essential to what's being talked about right now. The story itself is. So they go and they state their case. And Moses, who Moses is, he's head boss in charge, I guess. He's the one that's lead everything. They bring it to him, and he listens to them, and he's like, okay, you're making a good case. Moses, he goes, talks with upper management, if you will, comes back, and he's like, you know what? God says, y'all did make a good point. We're going to amend this law so that you can get also what you deserve. We admit that we didn't get this right off the bat, and you've shown us an error in the ways. back to that meeting. Now, much like this situation, I imagine that before the sisters spoke up, that there was probably, maybe some drinks flow. There's some nice celebratory things. Hey, we just did this big thing. This took a lot for us to figure out who's going to get all this land and everything. People are breaking out the cigars, thinking it's finished, and then all of a sudden, here they come, being like, hey, I know you thought that this was great, but actually, it's not. That's wonderful and needed audacity to go into a place where you don't get to talk. You shouldn't be the one talking and saying, I got something to say, and it's got to be talked about anyways. The sisters call out a system that is unjust to them. It's one that would have left them in a real bad situation, depending on the benevolence of others and whoever was there. In a system that was very male-dominated, patriarchally set up, not really set up to allow them to be free, thrive, succeed. So they speak up because they understood that justice is something that usually is going to come from those who actually need it the most. Those who know that they have been denied or are actively being denied something that they should have. And we've seen this in our history when we've looked at the women's movement and their quest for rights and voting rights. We've seen that play out in the civil rights movement. Both situation movements had to mobilize voices and feet and action to achieve a justice that initially was not intended for them. I learned only a few things in my life, but one of the few things I have learned is that some things that aren't intended to be made for me just haven't been made for me yet. If we look here in our state, we can see evidence of the people, much like the sisters, taking their case before our leaders in the legislature. We see it as parents and guardians point out that justice would be them not having to worry so much about their precious children and gun violence. Or we have people speaking out and for their personhood and identity. Something that shouldn't be up for debate, but yet it is, and here we are. With these two subjects in particular, like I said before, the concept of justice is more than just a nice theoretical concept. We're talking about life and death, belonging and not belonging. So I've talked about the state and the big us versus them thing, but what happens if we take a story of the sisters and apply it to life here in the church? What happens then? Fun, like any other church, we've got big and important decisions on the horizon. The church is working together towards those decisions and changes. And along the way, you've got to ask yourselves all the questions of, are we making the right moves? Are we making the moves for some or for all? Will we be willing to listen out to the smaller voices of those who we perceive to have less power and influence when they bring things to the table? Can we be willing to change once we have been shown their error in our the blind spot in our thinking or our planning? that was a situation that happened in the story. There was definitely had to be a moment where the daughters spoke and stated their case, and there had to be a realization of, oh man, I thought we had this. I really did. And yet now I see that we haven't. Can we accept that feeling and then move forward? Or will we act like we don't because it's too inconvenient for us maybe at the time, or whatever schedule or timeline we believe we're on, it doesn't line up. For us here, maybe Moses or Eleazar the priest, maybe that's more like the board, and I was like, in the minister. If we think about it on our terms here, what happens when we're pleading our case, and can we trust that that we'll be heard? Good and healthy churches do. Loving churches do. I think we're both of those things. Can we swap out that final step where it says Moses goes and talks to God? Well, for here, God is us. God is community. What happens and what will the community say in here when the thing gets brought up, when the potential injustice is here to be discussed? Can we be loving and willing enough to say that we're wrong and change? That's the beauty of the story, is that as scary as it was, and as much as there was on the line, as much should have told them to do not bring this up to them right now, they did, and they were heard. And things were changed. This story could remind us that when we are in positions or places that have more power and influence than others, we do have a duty to listen to what others are pointing out and to take it to heart. Doesn't always mean that we're going to do what everybody says, but listening and taking it to heart when we need to, that counts for a lot too. This is, as we move forward, something I think we're still going to have to wrestle with. It's always easier for someone to say it than for a group of people to do it. But I definitely believe in us and where things are headed. I want to leave you with this because I was here just for a little bit of time, not for a long time, to talk to you all. But I'll leave you with the question of, or the statement of, that true justice doesn't come from those who decide and decree it. It comes from those whose lives are lived and affected by it. So the task for us today is, may we never cease in stopping to listen for the calls for justice that are often whispered in our midst.